Welcome to another edition of MrMOnline. Today we're talking about, in number sense, we're talking about how we convert fractions to decimals, to percents, to ratios, and understanding there's equivalent for all of them. So if we draw our attention up to the board here, we can see we have a couple of fractions here, and then we have columns for decimals, percents, and ratios. Now, sometimes we can figure out what a decimal, a percent, and a ratio is just using mental math. And I put an example up here that hopefully we can all do that. So most of us would understand that if we have a fraction as 1/10 and you're asked to write a decimal equivalent for that, pretty much we've learned that that is 0.1, just without doing anything but mental math. And some of us like to put a 0 in front, some of us like to put a 0 after. It doesn't really matter, as you wish. It's still the same number, 0.1. Okay, and then when we go over to a percentage, we know that we basically just move the decimal place 2 spaces to the right. So the 0 is a little bit helpful in that respect if you want to add a 0 in there. So if we move the 0 over twice, we know that the percentage is going to be 10%. And the ratio, as we've been treating it so far, is just basically like a fraction on its side. So the ratio would be 1 to 10. Okay, so I think we all understand that, but this is where we get a little bit challenged, a little bit more challenging, where we have a fraction like 7/8. When you look at that right away, it's pretty hard to tell what that might be as a decimal. Okay, so, but once we have the decimal, and then it's easier to figure out the percent and the ratio. So going from fraction to decimal may be the most difficult of all of this. So we're going to spend a little time right now just figuring out what 7/8 is as a decimal. Okay, so the method that we're using is just long division. So I will put up a division symbol, and we'll just put the denominator on the outside, and we'll put the numerator on the inside. So just think of it as the reverse of the way you normally do a division question, because the larger number's on the outside, and usually when we divide whole numbers, the smaller number's on the outside. Okay, so we know right away here that 8 doesn't go into 7 ones, it's smaller than 1. So right away we're going to put a couple of zeros here, and we're going to add the decimal in right here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is divide 8 into 7, and we know that that's 0. And then we can also put the decimal there. And then we do 0 times 8 is 0. So then we end up with some subtraction that equals 70. So then the next step would be, to divide 8 into 70. And 8 into 70 goes 8 times. So we put an 8 up there, and 8 times 8 is 64. And let's subtract that, we get 6. Let's bring down our next 0, and we'll see that 8 goes into 60 7 times, because 8 times 7 is 56. And we have 4 left. Now we have a decimal that goes over 2 places. In grade 6, that's probably good enough, but if we kept on going, we put another 0 here, we could just go 8 into 40, let's say. I'll just do it for fun. And so I bring that down, and then 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40, and actually it brings us down to no remainder, so that's pretty accurate. So then our decimal becomes what we put in over here at the top, 0.87. I'll do the full 0.875. And then as a percentage, all we have to do is move the decimal over twice to the right. And if we're being really precise, then we're getting 87.5%. And lastly, the ratio is just 7 to 8 on its side, like that. And there you have one way to convert fractions to decimals. And as you can see, the rest of it isn't very hard. Okay, I hope you can practice this at home, especially this part right here. If you have difficulty with some of these questions, I hope it will help you answer some of the questions in class.